Good evening, everyone, and good evening to the web audience. That makes you smile. That someone in New York says good evening.
It's rare.
Right, very rare. Yeah. I welcome you all. My name is Jacobson, and I welcome you. Some new faces I see, and some of the renewed faces as well. So as a small little introduction, short introduction, even though this is called a class, a Wednesday night class, or whatever name one gives it, I have never really liked the word class because it conjures up images of classifications and labels and stereotypes and all some of the negative images and memories we have from school, right? Class, and you can't wait till the bell rings and all of that. So I definitely don't want to be giving that type of class where you can't wait till the bell rings. Here, of course, you're here by will, and you can leave whenever you like. So the challenge, of course, is especially when it comes to Judaism and Torah thought, is how to make it come alive in a way that we are excited and willing participants and wanting to learn the message. But it's hard to imagine, especially if you went to Hebrew school and were bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, a lot of Judaism is experienced by many as being quite hollow, empty, irrelevant. You know, maybe it has some nostalgic, historical value, but to call it a passionate and dynamic experience is not what most people would do. So this is the mission or the objective of this particular coming together. And actually there's a word that I would use, which is from the Bible here. In this week's Torah chapter, every week there's a corresponding Torah chapter. There are 52 weeks in the year, and each week has 7 days, so there's 7 sections of each chapter. So this week's chapter, which is close to the end of the book of Exodus, says, Vayakhel Moshe. And Moses gathered the people together. And this is a word that you hear often throughout the Bible, the word gathering, which is a whole different meaning than class. Or the Hebrew word for kehillah is congregation, comes from this term. Kehillah, vayakhel, kohol, the idea of a coming together. And the entire chapter, therefore, is named Vayakhel. So what is the meaning of a coming together? And why is this word specifically used? Because a gathering implies a type of what we call today synergy. When a few people come together, they each contribute something, and the sum and the total is more than the sum of the parts. It introduces, let's say, a higher energy that more than each individual could bring on their own. So when you talk about, for example, even scientifically, there's a calculation in the Talmud of the amount that people can carry. For example, if I'm able to lift 100 pounds, and one of you is able to lift 100 pounds, so the mathematical conclusion should be that together we can lift 200 pounds. But the fact is we can lift more than 200, two of us. Maybe something like 210. And if it's 3 people, it exponentially grows. It's more than 320 or 330. And the same is, so the more you add, the more the collective group can lift. So clearly there's an invisible energy, what we call synergy. The Kabbalah calls it Oir Oilal Kulana, which means that there's more than the sum of the parts when some things come together. Like, for example, just take the concept of a word. Let's say a word in English or a word in Hebrew, for that matter. In Hebrew, let's say the word Baruch. Baruch means the blessed, to be blessed. So the word Baruch in Hebrew consists of 4 Hebrew letters, Beis, Resh, Vav, and Chav. So individually, the Beis and the Resh, the Vav and the Chav, each have their own particular power, but only when they come together, then you have an idea, a concept called blessing. The same in English. The word blessing is made up of B-L-E-S-S-I-N-G, but we know that once it becomes a word, it's more than just the sum total of 6 letters. That's 6 letters, B-L-E-S, 7 letters. Right. So there's a synergies, and the same is true when we come here together, a group of people, that it creates a synergy, a power in the room that is more than the sum of the parts. And that's what the significance of when Moses gathered them together, what he was trying to do was to garner and to harness the power of the group. Now, it's critical also to mention, because this is yet another stereotype. The stereotype is that religion in general, and Judaism included, is non-individualistic. It's all about the group. And the argument goes that the religion is basically, we have to surrender some of our individuality and our free-spiritedness for the benefit of the group. There's nothing that can be farther than the truth. Judaism is highly individualistic and fiercely individualistic. The reason it's become a stereotypically conformist is not due to the true message of Judaism, but it's due to how people use it. People tend to like groups, tend to be conformists. So religion too has fallen into that trap. But if you think about the greatest leaders in Judaism, starting from Abraham and Moses, these were revolutionaries. They were pioneers. They were free spirits. And we don't see many like that today. Today we see groups, denominations, tribes, shtetls, each in their own group, and everybody distrusts the other group, which is like the antithesis to anything that Abraham and Moses and all the great leaders stood for. The concept of, for example, in a synagogue that we have a minyan, which is a quorum of people coming together to pray, or we have any other group. We find group, whether it's during the holidays, at a seder, or other parties or events and celebrations, is only meant to enhance the individuals, like I just said, synergy. But it's never meant to annihilate the individuality. And often that's what happens. So that's another, I guess, objective that I would say is, how do we learn to take from the Torah a message that is individualistic to ourselves? That means that it addresses our personal challenges and issues. So this is an overall introduction to what I do in this gathering here. It's a gathering instead of a class. And hopefully the synergy that we have here, and today with internet, synergy just grows with that many more people. We see its impact in places like the Middle East, so definitely, I'm sure New York and broadcasting from here is not weaker. That the synergy should help us enhance our individuality. So with that being said, I will go straight into the topic. And I'd like to first announce this class's dedication to a good friend of ours who's here, the participant in this class for a period of time, Maya, honored in memory of her dear father, Levi ben Yehuda and Batsheva, passed away 4 weeks ago. So may this class be a merit to his soul and to all of us who benefit from it, and connecting neshama, a soul that has elevated with Torah study and with one that benefits people. Obviously is a great schus, a great merit. So the class is dedicated to Levi ben Yehuda Batsheva by his dear daughter Maya. So the theme of this class, this gathering, is as we sent out today's email, are you at peace with yourself? Discovering harmony within. You know, we read in the news about plenty of battles going on in Libya and the Middle Eastern world now. There's also battles going on in the different legislative bodies in the United States and Wisconsin and others. And then there are battles going on in the boardrooms and the financial districts, especially dealing with the recession and all the challenges that it is posing. What is less talked about, and you won't usually see in the headlines, is the battles that we struggle with internally, our own personal, psychological, emotional battles. Now, it would be nice if we could say that we are people, that each of us is an individual that is completely seamless entity, and all our energies and our faculties and strengths are focused in one direction. But the fact is, we are fragmented people. Our psyches are splintered in many different directions, and the different voices inside of us tugging us in different directions. Some of us struggle with doubts and fears around a job, around relationships, even around where to live, and decisions, life decisions. What happens is that we end up usually be stuck in our status quo. which is whatever we're doing. That's what you usually end up doing until you're kicked in the pants strong enough, until you hit rock bottom, so to speak, that you're just uncomfortable enough or desperate enough to get out of that situation. So the fact that we're in certain situations doesn't always mean it's the best situation to be in. Often it's just simply the default state, comfort zone, for good or for bad. And we have these different voices inside of us. There's an expression in some of the Torah books that says, "Ein simcha kataras hasfekes." There's no joy and no simcha like resolving doubts. Doubt is a very powerful force in a person's life. Should you do this? Should you do the opposite? And then you often get paralyzed in the middle. Like that joke goes, the pollster comes to the door and says, "So are you this way or that way?" He says, "I think I'm from the undecided." He thinks he's from the undecided. Because undecided has also become a group. So there's the group of doubters. People who are living in doubt. And doubt is often connected to fear. And definitely, when we don't make a move, doubt starts becoming a powerful paralysis in our lives. Sometimes it's better to jolt you out of a stagnation just to do something, even if it's a mistake, is better than just remaining straddling the fence and just living in this limbo. This, of course, is very true in the areas of relationships and the issue of commitment. Are you going to be committed? You're not going to be committed. And this isn't a joke. I know a guy, he's almost 78 years old now. I know him for many years, and he's still, as he tells me, he's still keeping his options open as far as relationships go. Now, God should bless him, he should live another 30, 40, I don't care how many years. But my question is whether he'll still have his options open when he's 122, So in the areas of emotional connections and commitments, that definitely plagues us. So you have to ask yourself, almost what they call the klotz kasha, this simple, obvious question: why can't we just make decisions? Why is it that we are stuck so often? Now, maybe this doesn't apply to anybody here, but maybe in your distant memories, you may have some memories of being stuck, or you may have friends. So you can apply these ideas. If it's not to you, it's to someone you may know. Like that story where a guy came to one of the Rebbes and said to him, "Rebbe, I have a friend who's embarrassed to come to you, but he did something really bad. And he wants you to give some advice what to do about it." So he sent me because he was ashamed to come. So the Rebbe said to him, "Well, why did he have to expose himself to you? He could have come to me and say, I have a friend." You can understand what that means. So the bottom line is that sometimes we ask questions, we're ashamed to acknowledge it's ourselves, so we say the name of our friends, which is fine. That's what one needs to do, so be it, whatever it takes. So the question really is there a possibility to find peace in our lifetime? Inner peace, of course. And so we talk about, it's a theme, a recurrent theme in this class. They talk about our childhoods. I discussed at length last year. In any type of analysis of a person's life, or analysis of any problem, the most important thing of all is not just to define the problem, is to try to retrace the steps of how that problem came to be in the first place. So what we call in medicine, you have symptomatic medicine, and you have root medicine. Symptomatic medicine is if you have a cut, a bruise, pain, you take a Band-Aid or a painkiller or something to eliminate or neutralize or alleviate the symptoms. But then there's the root problem. So sometimes the problem is a very superficial one, and you could alleviate it. You take a Band-Aid and the blood clots, let's say in a cut on your finger or something, and then the natural healing process takes over, and it heals, and that's that. But God forbid if a person continues to bleed, or the healing doesn't happen, so you have to dig deeper and realize there's something going on that's not going to be solved just on a symptomatic level. That's called getting to the root of something. Now, many situations, if you don't have to get to the root, you don't necessarily have to dig that deep, if you can solve a problem on as I said, on a superficial level. But usually when it comes to deeper issues, like some of the ones I just described, the fears, the doubts, clarity, trying to find real clarity in your life, they often are connected to much deeper things than just a Band-Aid. Yes, we could sometimes relieve our pain through instant gratification. And that's what many people do, some type of way of relieving and self-medicating, whether, I don't just mean it physically, I mean it also figuratively, metaphorically, that we do things to immediately relieve ourselves from whatever it is that's the pressure we have. But as we all understand, that's not a long-term solution. It just alleviates for the moment. And sometimes you need that as well, because God forbid, for example, if a person is bleeding profusely or was in an accident, the first thing doctors have to do is stop the bleeding. You have to get out of the line of fire, as they say. And then you can do you can operate or surgery or whatever it is. You can even find out where the problem, you can't even see the problem when the blood is flowing. I'm just using that as an example. Psychologically, the same is true. You meet people, I meet many people, counsel them, people come for advice. And you see is an outpouring of emotion sometimes. That is like blood. It's not physical blood, but it's equally powerful, maybe even more powerful. That completely clouds the situation, because when you're in a position when you're really hurt and pain, and your emotions get the better of you, it's no different than a surging flood of blood that doesn't allow you to even find the wound, because there's so much of the immediate emotion. So part of the process is you have to at least stabilize the situation to be able to explore and go deeper into the emotions of a situation. That's why when you see someone who's in panic, or is having a panic attack, or is very depressed, or any other strong emotion has taken over their lives, at that moment it's almost impossible to do anything. Because the mood at the moment is so overwhelming, there's nothing you can really do. So the first challenge is to just stabilize, create a little comfort, maybe, some security, help the person find a place of a little relief, so they can then at least open up and speak and so on. So of course it's always best and always to heal things and deal with the challenges, not when the storm strikes, but beforehand. But as a preemptive measure, like I've mentioned very often here, for example, when you want to see how strong a tree is in the forest, you wait till you see a storm strike, you see which trees have strong roots, deep roots. But if you want to reinforce a tree, you can't do it in the middle of a storm. You have to do it earlier on. So challenges and pressures and tension and anxiety bring out the best and worst in us, and that's when you see how deep our roots are. So obviously the wise person, the wise person doesn't wait till the storm strikes or till the bleeding begins. You try to preempt it by building and reinforcing your spirit and psyche in times of calm. Because everybody has a state of calm, even if it's not permanent, but there are calmer times and more tense times. So that's just an overall picture. So the real challenge then is to really get into the core and the point of departure. When was it the first time that we started having doubts? When did we start being splintered and so many different voices that compete for our attention? That makes it difficult to find inner harmony. And what is the secret of people that you see, adults, that you see do have a very deep place of peace? Some call it like being at peace at your center. And no matter what is happening, whatever winds are howling around them, it's like the eye of a tornado. There's a certain inner calm. Nothing can faze them. That doesn't mean they don't go through challenges. It doesn't mean that they don't have difficulties. But there's a solid core, like a tree in a storm, that will not fall, that will stand strong because it has deep roots. So that's part of the questions that help us explore the answer, as they say. Shalas chacham chatzi tshuva. The question of a wise person is half an answer. Because if you ask the right question, sometimes we spend all our lives looking for the answer. The truth is we really should be finding the question. If you can articulate and frame the question in a focused way, that often starts leading you the right path where to find the answer. So in this context of getting to the root of things, one of the methods that I very often use in this gathering, as I did last week, and it's a very great way to really discover the root of things, is remember we were all once children. The good news is, no matter how disturbed your life may be right now, how splintered it is, how depressed, how difficult it is, you weren't always here. There was a time you weren't here. Which means there was a time when you were in the state of mind of a child. You look at newborn children, and you see they're the antithesis to us adults, particularly in this area. Children are at peace with themselves. So I know the first initial reaction that many people have is because they're little children, they're naive, they're stupid, they haven't seen the world yet. But wait till they grow up and become adults and they start seeing how cruel the world is, and they also won't be at peace. If you think about it, that sounds like a good answer, but it's not really true. How do you know that's the case? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe when they grow into adults, we impose upon them the lack of harmony in our lives. Not because maybe they're in the more natural place. So it's true that King Solomon wrote, more knowledge, more pain. So you could argue children don't have that much knowledge, so they don't have that much pain. Or, and obviously I'm choosing the or, and I'll make the case for it in a moment, maybe children are in the more natural place, who we really are, and it's this world and life, in our own complexities and disappointments and pain and hurt, that splinters us into pieces. In other words, what is the natural state of a human being? To be to be in harmony, or to be or a state of discord? That's the question. So the obvious proof, maybe the most obvious proof, that harmony is our most natural state, is ask yourself the question: what do you gravitate to? What would you prefer? What do you find? What resonates more? You know, if chaos was your comfort zone, and we'll discuss that as well, people sometimes develop a comfort zone that is based on chaos. But even people like that, that's one thing. The fact is, when we feel harmony, when we feel unity, when we feel things fit in our lives, it makes more sense to us. So you don't have to dig very deep. Even the most complicated adult, the most confused adult, still knows that's not exactly what we like. If it was, none of us would be searching to relieve our anxiety or our depression. Why not just say, hey, listen, you grew up, and that's it. That's a natural state of being, to be depressed, uncertain, doubtful, fearful, and unable to make decisions. But we don't accept that. And you see, people are desperate to find some relief, some solution. Now, sometimes our solutions can be worse than the problem. The way we find solutions, we create more problems. But we definitely don't like that state of being. A person who's very anxious does not at all find that to be very comforting. The fact that we get used to it, the fact that some of us have become so adept at being anxious, that doesn't mean necessarily that it's our natural state. It just means it's like you've gotten used to living in a building that's on fire. So you're very good at running from fire. So thinking in that context, then yes, children, it's true, they don't know much yet about life, but their state of harmony is very much us. And that natural state of being is who we really are. Now, why is this so vital, what I'm discussing right now? Because you have to establish this. If we were fundamentally chaotic creatures, we're at the core and essence of who we are confused, as I said, doubtful, and so on and so forth, then you could basically say that the most you can really expect is symptomatic medicine. Try to find some ways to navigate the minefield of life. But if in essence we are truly people who do have harmony at the center, the core of our souls, and the fact that we don't live by that, we live a life of anxiety or doubt and so on, then basically it's a whole different perspective then. Then it's a question, how do you retrace the steps? How do you reclaim your inner peace? That was really your birthright. So it's a significant difference between these two models. That's why it's vital to make the case. So obviously from the Torah perspective, the case is absolutely that we deserve and we are natural harmony people, basically. Unity lies at the core of our essence. And no matter how far we've wandered from that, how far we have become confused or doubtful or fearsome, or fearful, or all the things I mentioned earlier, that is not our natural state. That's an aberration. No matter how comfortable you are with it. That's a given, and that's a critical axiom, assumption, that's the basis of obviously many interventions. Interventions that help us retrace those steps. In addition to the fact that knowing that also is a critical component in healing. A big part of any healing process, of any growthful process, is knowing that you can reach your destination. If you have doubts whether you can really achieve your objectives, that alone weakens your resolve and your willpower, and it makes it more difficult to reach that place. When you see people, for example, who have particular challenges, and in their heart and their soul they say, I know I can get out of this, and I will get out of this, and they have friends that support them in that direction, there's no question that gives them more strength. I don't just mean more confidence, actual strength. You see it, for example, in, God forbid, a hospital where somebody's lying sick, and they have no visitors and no guests, and no friends and no family coming to visit them. Just being around illness and being ill is very demoralizing, and it has to weaken their immune system when there's no one giving them hope. Whereas somebody who has visitors and has people who are constantly there with them and gives them, it infuses a person with confidence, knows I can get out of the situation. So a big part of any type of success is that confidence that you could succeed. So here we got the catch-22 situation. That if you have no confidence in yourself and low self-esteem and you feel splintered and conflicted by different directions, so part of the problem is not only that you may not get there, you don't even feel you can get there, so that itself, in turn, like a vicious cycle, weakens you even further. And where do you go from there? So all these are critical questions in this whole discussion about harmony. I want to just, before I continue in discussing actual things that we can do, I want to elaborate a little more on this natural state. Because in Jewish thought there's this idea, and it was called, some psychologists call it cognitive life raft. There's cognitive dissonance, but there's also a cognitive life raft. Let me explain what that means. There is the idea that sometimes when you can't emotionally bring yourself to a certain place, what the exercise that is attempted is at least get your mind to dream of that place. To fantasize, even if it's not realistic at this point. Just to dream. Like sometimes they say, articulate your goals. Articulate your dreams, your aspirations. So even if you're not there yet, so the first thing is, the fact that your mind can go there is a critical component in several ways. Number one, it gives you it allows you to imagine that it's possible. So that already opens up a new door. If you don't imagine it's possible, you're definitely not going to make it possible. At this stage, it may just be imagination, just may be in the mind. But at least your mind has been brought there. It's just like, that itself is already uplifting. When you look at someone, for example, who sits alone and depressed, and is very down, it's not just they're emotionally down. Their thoughts are down. They're obsessed with their situation. They can't think of anything else. Consumed with their dire and dark state of mind. So the state of mind is equally important as the state of heart. It may have begun emotionally, but now their mind is also completely taken over. So if you can help a person, you could say not emotionally, you may not be able to go there right now because you have fear, doubt, or whatever it is, or a great loss in your life, or trauma. At least your mind is able to dream and go to places that your heart cannot go. That's called a cognitive life raft. And it's been proven that it has helped people get out of very difficult situations. Because it begins with cognitive. It's a life raft, like it's like a place you can stay, like an oasis. At least your mind can spend time there. But it's been proven that once you have that and you can visualize it, you can start building stepping stones to get there, even emotionally. Now this is what I just described as a completely secular psychological model. I want to say it now, show you how this is rooted, not only rooted, in an even more sophisticated way in Torah. They asked the Maggid of Mezrich once, who's the Maggid of Mezrich was essentially the great student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. And the Maggid in turn had many students who became rabbis in different cities and different countries. They started the Hasidic dynasties in different areas of the world. Usually the Hasidic dynasties you hear about are usually named after the city where the original Hasidic master, Rabbi lived. So the Mezrich Maggid once was asked the question, how can you command someone in the area of emotions? How could you command someone with a mitzvah, for instance, of Hafta Hashem Elokecha? There's a mitzvah we say in the Shema, right after the Shema, you should love God. How could you command someone to love God? Love is an emotion. How could you regulate emotions? You can command someone to do an act, to be charitable even if they're not in the mood, or they're stingy. You could command someone to eat kosher even if the feeling is not there. You command people to do things, actions, even if their spirit and their mood is not in that place. But how could you command someone to love? Either you love, you don't love. And the same can be asked about V'ahavta l'reacha kamecha, to love a fellow like yourself. You don't like somebody. How could you be commanded to like him? You can be commanded not to hate him, or not to do something that's hurtful to that person, even if you don't like him. But the mitzvah isn't just to be kind. in action. It says, V'ahavta, you should actually love that person. So this was the question asked to the Maggid. And his answer, long before we had words like cognitive life raft, was exactly that. He said the mitzvah, as he put it, is under his beinunus. The mitzvah is to concentrate and to meditate and to think about the beauty of whether it's God or another person. And when you concentrate long enough and you meditate on it, and with your mind, cognitively, ultimately that will bring you also to feelings. So, if you meet someone you don't like, what the Hasidic model is, you may not like their externals, they may not like their behavior mechanisms, you may not like their personality. But if you're able to meditate on the fact that this person is a soul, a divine image that God put into this earth, and there's something, and there are deeper resources that you may not see, not all about you and what you like, you can come to even like a person that initially you didn't like. Does that take work? Yes, it can take a lot of work, but it's a combination of humility and knowing it's not about you. We have even the story in the Talmud that one of the sages was walking and he saw a person who was very uncomely, a very ugly person. And he said, Kama mechur kelizeh. Look how ugly is this vessel. You know, he's referring to this human being. Look how ugly is this body. And this man said to the sage, Lech le'uman shasani. Go to the craftsman that shaped me, that crafted me. And he taught him the lesson that, you know, you're looking with your eyes. Go to the craftsman, God who put me here. So essentially, it's using a little more mystical terminology. What you see is not what you get. You may see a table and it may be very destructive. You may see a candy and it could be full of poison. You can see something that looks poisonous and it could be the most beneficial herb. So the first thing is to know that what you see is not what you get. We are limited human beings with limited vision and limited faculties. And we see at best the outer layer. Even though they kept telling us don't judge a book by its cover, everybody judges a book by its cover. That's why it's $1 billion industry. You know, because if no one was judging books by its cover, we wouldn't have marketing, we wouldn't have packaging, we wouldn't have book covers, we wouldn't have anything. People would just be looking for the truth. So things are packaged, and sometimes distorted, and sometimes even deceptively. So there's plenty of deceit in this world because we are deceived by the outer, and the outer can conceal and even distort what's inside. A person can smile to you and then stab you in the back. Echad b'peh, echad b'lev. They say one thing, their heart says another. And then there's the concept of teiche kibare, which means what you see is what you get. That a person, their inside is on their outside. In the Talmud, there's even an argument between two great scholars. One would not receive students, not accept students in his academy if they were not teiche kibare, if their inside and outside were not consistent. They were not that seamless. If there was inconsistencies, hypocrisy, they weren't accepted. And there was another sage who did accept. Obviously, one had a lot more students than the other, as you can imagine. So the point is that each has a merit. Because on one hand, you know, are you going to really meet people that are so pure? So you have to begin somewhere. But the point is that we live in a world where the outside is not all reflective of the inside. And especially if you talk from a mystical point of view, does anyone see the God's hand inside the glove of this universe? It takes effort, it takes faith, it takes work to see that there's something behind the curtain, or to even believe it, or to feel it to that extent. But it's there. The fact that we don't see it means nothing, because since when are we the arbiters of truth and we, like, as if we see everything? It's even arrogant to say, since I don't see it, it's not there. That is a very arrogant statement. Based on that, I'd like to know how much truth you will find in your life. What do you see? Love you do see? And what exactly do we see that? If we're going to say, only what I see is what I get, only what I see is what I will accept. Now, I'm not saying everything we don't see has to be true. But to just make a statement that because my senses don't experience it, and that's it, that's the criteria of a barometer of reality, is really basically any intelligent person. That itself locks you off from really exploring or discovering new, broader horizons. So the journey of knowledge and intelligence is, number one, is you have to be always ready for hear another perspective. If a person doesn't have that, they right there have cut themselves off from ever growing. The ability to know, as much as I figured out, there may be more. And probably there is more. It's like climbing a mountain. As you climb higher, the more you know, the broader the horizons are. So, the cognitive concept, going back to the Maggid, What he's saying is essentially exactly that. Take your mind. Your mind can take you to places that your heart may not be ready to go yet. Which, if you think about it, is really what we all do anyway naturally. For example, if you date someone. Okay? So the first thing you're really doing, I'm talking about if you're a balanced and healthy person, is the first thing you're doing is two people checking each other out in a way where they allow their minds to be in control. And even if you have an emotional attraction or something, you know that you want to find out what kind of person this is before you get more involved and become more committed. And that's true, that's in a relationship. The same is true business-wise. If you start a new partner or invest in a new business, you want to test the waters first before you go in all the way. Because you want to see, and with your mind, you soberly and objectively try to analyze the situation. Because we know if you just follow your heart, you can get into trouble. Someone who knows how to manipulate emotionally can get somebody to be turned on or inspired by something, and then later you find out you made a mistake. So we all, in healthy situations, would like to believe that you begin with a certain cognitive perspective. Before you really let your heart all the way in, you allow your mind to analyze it. In a sense, like the mind is in that sense a reflective force, like a computer, like a reflection. You reflect on the subject matter. And the emotion is when you already make the commitment. Emotion is already connected to your impulses and your instincts and so on. But you don't want that to come into play until you've really made sure with your mind. Now, of course, most of the mistakes and most of the trouble we get into is when we don't let the mind really do its job, and the emotions do take over, and you just throw all the caution to the winds, and you don't allow that cognitive stage to fully take place. Do the proper research, which happens all the time to all of us. We make this mistake. So we all understand that it's a two-step process. Now that's my point. Even if you're making the mistake, we still understand, and we hopefully try to build in some checks and balances to make sure it works that way. Now, just to show you, the plot thickens because there are times that you have to make a quick decision. You can't always afford, or there is no time always to say, I'm going to reflect on this for another year. There are situations. So there, ultimately, yes, there's a risk. But remember, any risk, it's like we talk about a calculated risk. The more intelligence, the more experience you have, the more you can instinctively say, I have a feeling this is the way to go. But in a healthy situation, there's definitely a stage where your mind has to be the one checking it out before an emotion is committed to. So that's the Maggid's ways of describing it, that the mitzvah is on the cognitive side of things, and that will ultimately lead to the emotions, to the Vahafta. So you see a complete parallel between this concept in psychology today with ideas that go back really hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. Because remember, what the Maggid said was not his innovation. That was the way when the Torah first said the mitzvah of love God and love a fellow. How did Moses do it? How did the people then do it? So clearly they also had to deal with this two-step process. So this is basically, going back to our discussion here, that the key thing, and this is why we discuss these matters even before we act on them, the key thing is to imagine and visualize a world of harmony within ourselves. So to help us do that, I'm going to give you a few thoughts that help us put ourselves in that mode. And don't ever think, as I always mention, when you look at children, your own children, now I have my little grandchildren running around in California. I was just there, so. And I mention them not only because I love them and because I like to mention them for the record and for the videotape when they grow older, but also because the fact is God blesses us with people in our lives. Even if you may not have your own children, there may be children from family members and so on. Children are a real specimen, and I don't mean to try to put them into a type of laboratory, but they're a living example of natural harmony. And if you want to develop your cognitive life raft in a world of confusion, it's good to study people who are not in that place, obviously, and see what makes them tick. Maybe at some point you'll go down back on your fours and just start crawling around like a little child and re-access your harmony. That's not my intention, just for the record. The point is there's things to learn. But here are some ideas about how harmony is our natural state. I mentioned it earlier. Here's a few examples. As I said, even the person who's lived an entire life of anxiety or confusion still does not find that to be the most pleasant state of being. Maybe the one that is like they say, the comfortable evil is better than the unknown evil, but it's still not necessarily our natural state. We naturally gravitate to harmony and unity, and I'll give you a few examples. No matter how organized or disorganized you think you are, even the most disorganized person on this earth also has some organizational methods. Now, for example, we all are disturbed when we see things that are incoherent. Let's say you come into a room and things are not where they should be. It disturbs us. So we make shelves, whether it's in our kitchens, in our living rooms, in our dining rooms, in our bookshelves, in our computers, file directories. Now, I know some of you probably suffer from the problem that you have thousands of files and you have no idea how to find them. Except if you do some search, which of course doesn't mean there's order, it just means the search engine is finding what is disorganized. But you know how difficult it is. It's not like you like it that way. It's just because no one showed you a method of how to organize it. If someone had showed you a method, it would have been a lot easier. So, even people, I know people who you come to their office, and you have papers literally on desks like this, all the way almost to the ceiling. And once every 7 years it falls, and that's when it's a mess. And if you ask them, how do you have order? How could you do that? You ever see such offices? And how could you, and I'm talking about someone who's sitting at the desk, I'm not talking about a storage desk. Sits at the desk, has a little space, but he has that's it. And for this person, in a strange way, he'll say to you, or she'll say to you, tell me what you're looking for. And you ask them, and they more or less know almost everything that's there. Because the mind, I guess, is a very broad mind, and they figured out, in their mind. But no one else can retrieve it. That's the only problem. That person may be able to retrieve it. And if they don't, they could probably spend a whole week just looking for it, which is another waste of time. But in their mind, there's some form of order. My point that I'm saying is that human beings gravitate toward order. Well, that's why we stereotype. We see people, you right away say, oh, this person belongs to this category, that category. It's a way of making order in our lives. And even the gadgets that we buy, the iPhones and the iPads and the Blackberries, etc., one of the things that, which ones are the most popular? The ones that really help us create order. Because when you find something that really can organize things for you easily, it's the most pleasant thing. Again, I'm not saying all of us are good at it. Some of us have not been trained. Some are very trained in information architecture, for example. As a writer and a researcher for many years, I've developed methods of very, very serious organization. And it's a tremendous asset because I literally can access anything I've written even 25 years ago or things I've stored. Because I developed a system. And I worked hard at the system. And once you have it, it's a structure. And it's a structure that is intact. And also, I wouldn't say I'm the best at it. There's some people who are much crazier, obsessed with that. The point I'm making here is that human beings gravitate to order. And even if you're not that organized because you weren't taught to know, you see someone else, you say, you'd like that. Nobody will say, I prefer chaos over order. I prefer everything to be everywhere. Now, interestingly, there is a phenomenon, I don't know if you're familiar with psychological phenomenon, of people who are hoarders. You go into their homes, and you see literally you can't even walk through their home. They collect everything, they never throw out anything, and they hoard things. And it looks like a major chaos. How could anyone live in a place like that? I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's often associated with children who grow up in very, very chaotic and abusive homes. And this is a way for them to create security is by having everything insecure, if you know what I mean. They create security by, in a sense, holding on to everything. And for them, that's a form of comfort. And it is a distortion. There's no question about it. It's not a natural state. It's usually a result of trying to find some type of security. I know it sounds odd. How could you find security by having a home that's so chaotic? But it creates it's almost like the flight syndrome. People who grew up in homes where there's abuse, they're always ready to run. So in a way, a home like that is very conducive to that. They're always they don't settle into things. They're always on the move. So when you're moving, of course, you have boxes everywhere and so on. I'm not going to go into the analysis of hoarding, but the point I want to make is that's not a natural state. A natural state for human beings is order. And look at little children. As they grow, and you show them, here's their room and here's where their shoes are and this, you'll see they're very, very comfortable when they, and take something away from the place that they usually find it, you'll always find the child will be very disturbed. But little things, even like the shoes in the wrong place. And not because they're obsessed, it's because it's a very form of security is finding how to navigate in a world of many, many details, that a human being wants to have coordinates that are in their place. The reason I'm elaborating so much is I'm trying to make the case and also cognitively show that each of us really wants that. And even each of us really that's our natural place. Why do you think, for example, when you go into water? Well, we know that beachfront property is very expensive. Right? People gravitate to water. And swimming and so on. So the evolutionists say the reason is because we were once amphibians. So we were once like frogs and tadpoles and fish. So we go back to our root. That's what they say. The Torah says that the water is a state of harmony as opposed to land. Water is a harmonious state. Water is a uniter of things. It makes things grow. We all lived 9 months in our mother's womb, surrounded by embryonic fluid. And earth itself, Bereshit, it says in the beginning when God created heaven and earth, it was first mayim b'mayim, everything was submerged in water. And only on the second day did God separate the higher waters and the lower waters. Water is considered to be a state of harmony. In the Kabbalistic terminology, water is chesed, love. And therefore, when a person goes into water, there's some type of peace that comes to you. It's a peaceful place to be. You know, sometimes you can lie on your back in the water and put your ears under the water and you drown out all the sounds. There's a very deep harmony in that. Which is why it's not an accident that a mikvah, the idea of a mikvah is a place that purifies. Like the Rambam says, Maimonides writes, a mikvah, which is like a ritual bath, is not a bath. It's not a shower. You're not coming to clean yourself physically. As he says, tumah, spiritual uncleanliness, is not a physical grime. When you go into water, you clean yourself. It's, as he says, mei hadas hatoyer. Water is compared to the pure waters of knowledge. And it's a uniter. Whereas tumah in Hebrew, we say the word tumah, impure, and tara. What does impure and pure mean? When you think about it, someone asks you, what's impure? Most people, impure means it's dirty. And if it's pure, it's clean. That's not pure and impure. Because then in that case, you don't need a mikvah. You can use a shower, you can use anything. Purity and impurity essentially are spiritual states. You can say that the tumah is more like a disconnected state, and tara is a connected state. So like the tumah would be dissonance. In the Kabbalists put it this way: that tara is where tumah is when you have the keichus atum, which means when you have negative energy. Negative energy splinters things apart. Positive energy, tara, brings things together. So water, which is a uniter, brings things together, has the properties and the powers to purify from something that is splintered. So it's really the unity battling, essentially, fragmentation. That's why you have the Torah says, in the book, the Yeshaya, the prophet says, in the Messianic times, it says, Lo yorei v'lo yashchisu al har kodeshi. It says that there will no longer be evil and destruction on my holy mountain. Ki mala orez deis Hashem kamayim leyom echasim. Because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Again, a reference to knowledge. Water covers the sea. What does that do? That counters the destruction, yorei v'yashchisu, destruction and evil of the world. Now you could say, what's the connection? There are a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge, and they don't necessarily contribute to bringing peace to this world. Some people who have a lot of knowledge actually cause more problems than those that are not so knowledgeable. So the emphasis in the verse there is Deus Hashem. It's not just knowledge. We're talking about divine knowledge. Humble knowledge. What is the power of knowledge? So think about it. When someone's ignorant, it always breeds distrust. People who know things, the more knowledgeable you are of other people, the more you can coexist with them. Knowledge is what brings, as the expression in the Kabbalistic terms from the Arizal, moichin de gadlus. A person who has knowledge has a scope, has a maturity, that they can hear someone disagree with them and still be able to be calm about it. Can listen to different opinions. People who have katnus hameichin, very immature knowledge, or little knowledge, are people who just can't tolerate. Someone says something different than them, they immediately go crazy. People who have the maturity of knowledge is the person who's able to hear many different opinions and then weigh them all, has the presence of mind, has the patience, has the humility, has the knowledge to know that there are different ways to look at things, and even if you adamantly disagree, you're secure enough with your position that you don't have to say, you're wrong, for me to be right. So that's called, and that's associated with water again. So these are all examples of harmony in our lives, and they're all around. Another example of harmony, music. Music. You could be in a very scattered place, a very disturbed place even, and then a song starts playing that you like, that resonates, that touches you in a certain way, and suddenly it changes your mood. Doesn't mean it lasts. Could be right after the song you get as crazy as ever. But something happens. What's happening? Music is by nature harmony. That's what music is. Take the same musical notes and sounds and play them in the wrong order, they're grating and they're very disturbing. Play a record backwards and you'll see what I mean. I don't mean Paul McCartney's version of whatever, but some music was written that way. It's very grating. Not just backwards, or you play it in completely wrong order. You know, you right away see something's wrong. Your eyes, your ears hear there's something wrong. Music is harmony. Music is a language of the soul, something I've discussed many, many times here. It's a language that children relate to without any education. And it's a language that puts people at ease. Music can comfort a person. Now it's true that there is music today that's very disturbing. You hear it, like especially certain heavy metal and so on, and rap that's almost violent. Now really it brings out the worst in you. But that's because human beings are human beings. Listen, we can write music also that's very angry music, you know, expressing emotions that are very angry. But by nature, most music and its natural state is more harmonious. You know. So the point is that here's another example of harmony in our lives. So that which explains why we often escape into these venues. When we travel, or we go to the water, or we listen to music, or we travel to places, beautiful nature. You go to new places in the world, and you see certain God's wonders in this universe. It's the same thing. It's harmony. You see a certain harmony. You see symmetry in nature. Sometimes that you don't see among human beings, you know, because we have free will. We fight with each other. We're at war with each other. Nature is not at war. Nature, without human intervention, is a very peaceful place. That doesn't mean there aren't predators and prey, and that there aren't natural disasters and stuff like that. But overall, nature has a balance. And the more you study nature, all parts of it, whether it's mineral world, the vegetable world, the animal world, even meteorological world, you know, how weather patterns develop. Nature has its beautiful symmetry that works with certain type of peace and calm, and when you see it and you hear it, you respond to it. So the question then is, okay, so I said go on and on. So for argument's sake, we have established here that harmony is our natural state, that we have examples of it all around us, that we respond to those examples. But then the question is, okay, but that's there, and you're here. How can we reconnect the two? Which brings me back to this cognitive life raft. The first step that's critical in any type of finding inner peace and inner harmony is you have to travel with your mind there. There's no way that a person living in a chaotic environment, and in the middle of a mess, in the middle of anxiety, in the middle of all the so-called the rat race, or whatever you want to call it, the rush hour of life, just like I said earlier, in the middle of a storm, it's hard to imagine that you can suddenly, in the middle of a storm, you know, bolster up and reinforce a tree to make it stand strong. It doesn't work that way. Just like ships at sea, in the middle of a typhoon, you're not going to be able to suddenly fix the ship. So the most important step is the cognitive life raft that I mentioned earlier. You have to be able to travel with your mind to places like that. And that will. To be able to do so, not sporadically, on a daily basis, in the morning, especially when you need it most. Because when you begin to train your mind to go to places like that, what happens is you start being able to envision that it's possible. So that's one critical component. So to go back to what I said earlier, if you study people who have that inner peace, you'll see they all share this common denominator. They're all able to do that. And if you ask them, you'll see that they'll tell you that. That they're able to take their minds and go to a place that's more peaceful than this world. Whatever that place may be. It can be through spiritual meditation. It can be through nature. It could be through music. It can be all the above. It can be a combination and so on. And there's really no limit because each of us has our own particular so-called template and range of experience. Some people do this. I've seen this in some therapy where they call it inner child therapy. They do it with getting memories from your childhood that bring you to a place like that. Now for others, memories in their childhood is the opposite, so you have to be careful whether you go there or not. But in childhood memories, most of us, unless, as I said, unless you lived in a very radical, violent, or abusive environment, most people have memories that are extremely comforting. It could be memory of parents who are very loving and unconditionally loving. It could be traveling somewhere. It could be small little things that are, it could be your father walking with you and holding your hand and giving you a certain confidence. And don't underestimate the power of these things. Because if you have it in your memory banks, that means it's with you for all those years. So it's not childish to think about those type of things. Some people feel, I once suggested it to someone, they say, hey, listen, I'm not a kid, I'm not going to go back to my childhood. So I say, okay, so then live with your adulthood and then leave me alone, I didn't say it quite that way, but you know what I'm trying to say. He thought it was like it doesn't pass, whatever, it does not befitting his pride to think about. But the fact is, it's in your memory banks. What does that mean? That means you're carrying it longer than anyone has. And we're not talking about going back there. We're talking about, what's the word for this? Like accessing the program inside of you that's in there to be able to bring it up forward. That's really what it is. It's like retrieving a memory bank, an old file, so to speak. I can go on and give many examples, but everybody has a series of such places. It could be, I said, places to travel, other things. So some people, I've asked a few people about this, and some people, actually the snow is a big one for many. Because the snow when you're a child has a certain type, you're not going to school, you stay home, so on. Now, of course, I have to qualify again, there are people growing up in homes that were war zones. And a war zone obviously is not exactly conducive to harmony. And that's where it gets more difficult, so you have to find other things. But every one of you in this room, if you were to sit with someone or yourself, you can come up with 10 such images, 20. And don't underestimate its power. Remember, you don't want to wait till the storm strikes and be desperate. You want to build it before. You want to have that available to you. And that's the part of the way of building a cognitive picture. And you'll see people who have that place to go to can always access it. I'll speak for myself. I know sometimes the situations are extremely difficult, whatever it may be. Everyone's got their challenges. And you could either just say, like Robert Frost did say, that the only way out is through. So sometimes when you're in difficult situations, the only way out is to go through. You can't run away. But there's also times that you need to have an ability to go to a place that's like in a different place. You just transport yourself to another time and place. And even while you're doing it, you may know that you're escaping in a way. It is escapism to some extent. You could say, why don't you just deal with your challenges? But the goal here is not escapism. The goal is just gathering strength from that place. So when you deal with something, you start realizing I have more strength than I thought I had. So I can't overestimate the power of this tool that is really underutilized by many of us. We don't realize how powerful this is because it's inside of you and it reconnects you to that inner harmony that is your natural birthright inside of each of us. That's one thing. The second thing, what happens is when a person begins to do that after a period of time, you begin to crave more and more of that type of life. And that's a good sign, because when you begin to crave something good, it makes you want to have it. We all know what temptation is about, right? Has anyone in this room never been tempted in any way? Any tzaddikim like that? So we all know what the power of temptation. And it's usually actually associated with negative things. Temptation is usually connected to lustful, illicit, things that are forbidden fruit, as they say. Mayim gnuvim yimtaku. That stolen waters are always sweeter. But the truth is, and this is another stereotype, temptation is not a negative thing at all. There's an interesting, not interesting, I would say a revolutionary thought from the Baal HaTanya, of Shneur Zalman of Liad. I may have discussed it once. I think I did. The class was called Anatomy of Lust and Desire. A lot of people came to that. They wanted to know what I'm going to say. It wasn't that racy, let's put it that way. So the anatomy of lust and desire. And I quote, what he says is a fascinating thing, that if this was applied to life today, it would change a lot, many, many, many things. But he basically says, if you want to look it up, it's in PARSHA Chukas. So he says the following. He says, when you talk about desire, taiva, called in Hebrew a taiva. A taiva means a desire, a lust, often associated with negative things. A person has a taiva for something. It could be for food, it could be for sex, it could be for gambling, it could be drugs, and it could be also positive things. You could desire very good things. As a matter of fact, the expression used on God, why He created the universe, was desire. Nesava, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God had a desire, He wanted a home in this world. That word is used, of all words, taiva. So he discusses the idea of a taiva, the nature, as I said, the anatomy of desire. Somebody desires something. Think of it, a deep desire for something, whatever it may be. Often desire leads us astray, because desire is very powerful, overwhelms you, and the moment of passion, most people make many big mistakes, which a minute later you say to yourself, why couldn't I control myself? Big mistakes are made. Because that moment completely consumes you, you get obsessed like a crazy man or woman. And some of the biggest mistakes in life can be done that way, and some irreversible ones too, if there's such a thing. So you often associate, especially in the Puritan society that comes out of Christian guilt, and you'll see why I'm saying that in a moment, that comes out of guilt around sexuality and stuff like that. Desire is seen as some type of necessary evil, or something to be ashamed of. Shame, guilt, all neurosis is associated with it. So here's what he says, Alter Rebbe in Valatanya in this place. He said desire has to be separated into two parts. There's the desire in the heart, or in the soul, or in the psyche that wants something, and there's the object of desire. He calls it the koyach hamesava, the power to desire, and the taiva itself, the object of desire. Like everything has a subject and object. There's you desire something. And then what is it that you're desiring? So let's take, for example, children. Children desire things. They may be small things, but they desire. A child gets obsessed, wants to have this toy, or this candy, or this cookie, or whatever. And then starts throwing a tantrum. That's a desire. It's a desire for small things, and sometimes you give in and give the child. Sometimes you train the child and say, no, that's not. So you have to learn to discipline yourself. We get a little older, our desires are not for little toys and candies, perhaps. They're for other things. They're for money, for honor, covet, power. We could have desire for creativity, for art, for music, for reading. Some people are ravenous readers, voracious readers. They read all the time. You have many, many desires. Then of course there are desires that are very illicit. Desires of unhealthy things. Things that are inappropriate, things that are destructive. And let's even get to desires like real addictions. Does anyone that's addicted to something want to become addicted? No human being on this earth wants to be dependent on something. So what's happening? The addiction is a desire, a passion, that wants to be released, and you get into something and then you can't get out. So it's not that someone, nobody says, I'm starting out my life, I want to get addicted to a drug or to alcohol. I wanted to be dependent on it. I wanted to take control of my life. No normal person would ever say such a thing. What happens is the desire is so strong that the object takes control of the person. Who's the slave and who's the owner, basically. That's the challenge. So what he says here is like this. He says in this place, he says that to say that the power of desire is unholy, God forbid, the only dead people don't have desires. The fact that God gave us life and a soul has passion, and wants things, and lusts and desires, that itself is a very pure thing. The question is the object of the desire. The object could be very unholy, or it could also be very holy. Not every object is appropriate, but they're not necessarily tied together. When you, for example, teach an adult and say, listen, instead of having a desire for candies or for money, why don't you have desire for something a little more sublime? You're not telling him give up your desire. You're just saying give up the object and just channel it to something else. So the image and stereotype around religion, and Judaism particularly, is that Judaism demands that we should have no desires. You should be basically a zombie that serves God. Which really puts major questions. So why did God give us passion? And why do we have a soul? Why didn't you just create us like machines? So some argue, well, overcome your passions. But then you have concepts in the Kabbalah and other places, you have people like, was Moses a passionate man, or was he some type of mediocre guy? He was very passionate. You have throughout the Torah, the greatest spiritual people are extremely passionate people. The difference between them and the rest of us is that they found objects of their desire that are extremely extremely sublime, and not destructive, and not ones that control you. Things that are connected with humility and so on. But most of us think of a tzaddik as not like a life you want to live. It's not very exciting. Like you say, you want to have heaven for the climate and hell for the company. Right? So, what is it? Billy Joel sings it this way. He says, you'd rather sing with the sinners than pray with the saints, right? Something like that. Because it doesn't seem very exciting. But the fact of the matter, a true tzaddik is very passionate, except his passion is for things that most of us don't consider very valuable. So this is not a question about who has more lust or desire. It's a question with the object of the desire. Now, obviously, to have desire for simple objects and for an instant gratification is a lot easier than developing a mature desire for spirituality. And Moses wanted to go into Israel very much. He prayed 515 times until God finally said to him, stop praying. If he had not told him that, he would have continued praying, obviously. Why do you want to go into Israel? Well, he wanted to have like a nice retirement village somewhere. The Talmud asks us that he wanted the fruits and the good food of the land. No, he knew that going into Israel was the ultimate spiritual fulfillment. It even says in some books that Moses gone into Israel, the temple could never be destroyed because anything Moses touched became eternal. And had he built the temple, it would never have been able to be destroyed. So you would have a messianic age, a world of total spiritual higher consciousness. That's what he wanted. And it says that there are 50 gates. There are 50 gates of understanding that God created, and 49 he gave to the human race, and the 50th remains elusive. So it says that Moses was the only man that was able to climb all 49 gates, and the 50th he could not gain until the last day of his life. That's why the Maggid says this. Har Nevoy, what's the name of the mountain that Moses is buried? Nevoy. Nun Beis Vav, Nun Boy. Because on that mountain is where he found the 50th. It's like what God said to Moses. Moses says, show me your face. Show me your Hareini Nach Vedecha. Show me your glory. Show me your face. And Moses says, God says, no man can live and see my face. Which means he wanted to see the essence of all of reality. Now, for some of us, we may not relate to that idea, but for a person who understands what that means, there's no greater passion than that, because it's the essence of all truth. Deeper than any desire that you can imagine. Now, you could say, how can you compare that, for example, to the sexual desire of a human being? You want to know something? According to the Torah, the sexual desire that evolves on the human physical level evolves from us wanting to be intimate with God. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. That's why sexuality in Judaism is a very sacred thing. It's not a necessary evil. It's not based on original sin, and it's not based on guilt and shame. And the Ramban, around 1,000 years ago, he wrote a letter which was addressing this directly. He starts off the letter by saying, not like many think that sexuality is an ugly or dirty thing. Sexuality is a divine sacred gift. Well, who do you think he was negating? He was negating the Christian perspective. He doesn't say it specifically. Because Christianity has contaminated even Jewish thinking about this. Celibacy is considered to be the holiest thing you can be in Christianity. Whether they live up to it or not is another story. But you want to know something? Celibacy actually doesn't come from Christianity. It comes from real estate issues. That in the Middle Ages, I think in the 8th century, until the 8th century, celibacy didn't exist in Christianity. But the children of the priests were demanding they became heirs to the buildings and the real estate, the property that the church owned. So the church decided to decree that from now on celibacy, so that way no one can make any claims. You can look it up. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's true. And then, of course, they found that Jesus may have been celibate, etc. But the bottom line is that in Judaism, celibacy is considered actually a crime, and considered to be not something at all preferable. A high priest, a leader, any leader cannot be celibate, must be married, etc. But I'm not discussing sexuality per se. I just wanted to point out the fact that sexuality can be the root of so much evil and selfishness doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad thing. It just means human beings can use it it's like any power. The greater the force, the greater the passion, the more power it has over us. But the bottom line question is, as I said, what is the object of the desire and what is the root of the desire itself? So when you go back to the issue of finding inner peace and harmony, the fact is that when a person is able to cognitively go to a place that gives them the ability to discover harmony, at least in your mind, then you begin to start the building a desire for it. And when you have a desire for something, that's when success can help. I have no doubt, for example, I don't deal with this so much, but I deal with it from time to time, teens at risk, etc. People get caught up with alcohol and drugs, and it takes over their lives. And just recently, a while ago, I was speaking to a group of teenagers, very, people who are trying their best. They're in rehab, many of them. Some are having difficulty, they regress, etc. And I remember, I asked them, so tell me, what do you think is the worst enemy of a teenager? Each one had their thing. This one said the sex, and this one said money, and this one said, they all had their, the media, etc., peer pressure. And I told them, I said, let me ask you, what do you think about this? Think of the worst enemy being boredom. Boredom, monotony, emptiness. When you're bored, you have nothing to do. So we have an expression, boy reik, ein boy mayim. When the pit is empty and has no water, ultimately, the chashav v'akravim yesh boy. All negative forces enter into vacuums. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the psyche abhors it even more. When there's a vacuum, it doesn't look so bad. You say, hey, at least it's not bad. It's not good, but it's a vacuum. Vacuum is the worst thing for a human being. A vacuum is like a black hole. It will attract everything. Because when you're bored and you have passion in your soul, you will find anything to relieve the boredom. If it's healthy, great, and usually whatever comes your way. You'll see the most addictive personalities are the most passionate souls. People who are mediocre don't get addicted that quickly. People who are like blasé, there's this. Like that girl comes home from school, she gets a B on her report card, her father says, no, not in this home. You either get an F or you get an A+, but not mediocre. You either fail completely or you succeed completely. So there's something about passion that goes both ways, and that's also a Maimer Chazal, if you need that. Kol hagadol mechavere, yitzre gadol mimenu. The greater the person, the greater is his passion, basically, is his yetzer, his evil inclination. Because he's powerful, and power has a lot of energy in it. So when we talk about passion, one of the biggest challenges in life is how do you take passion going the wrong direction and harness it and redirect it. In other words, how do you change the object of desire? Because here's the story. Going back to the inner harmony. As long as there's an object in this world that controls you, you can never have harmony. Because your soul will never tolerate being a slave to any object. It will create fragmentation, it will create a splinter, and you'll have voices inside you that will constantly haunt you. No human being in history has ever achieved animal bliss. Come to a place where I can just satisfy every desire or taiva I want and be satisfied. It doesn't work. Now you can give many reasons why it doesn't work. Some say because religion is so powerful it created this guilt and neurosis in everyone. Or you can say maybe your soul doesn't want to be a slave and it will not accept being owned by anything. Even though you may have given in to some passion or some desire, some object that may not be so great for you. So the key here is, to go back to sum up, is you have to have a cognitive life raft of finding a harmonious place, and then starting to create steps to get there, and wanting it so much that you passionately want it. And then you have to look at the things that you filled the void with. Because what happens is, over the years, how we got from here to here, from our childhood, where we were, as I said, seamless people, harmony, inner peace. Children do not have natural anxiety. It all comes from their adult life, or from the adults around them, or from the environment around them. Children don't have natural anxiety. It doesn't exist. Because they're seamless. They live like... That's why children are not sexually conscious. A child goes to a bookstore naked. It's not like inhibited or self-conscious, because it doesn't see any problem. It's all godly at that point. It's when you start seeing human beings in projecting their shame and their guilt and their splinters, their fragmentation, then the child starts becoming fragmented. When is the first time a child learns to lie? To be deceptive. When it hears a parent lie, it sees adults, it sees it's a method, it works. The first time you don't believe it, we don't even remember, but if you're able to go to this first stage, the first time you see someone say to you something, you believe them. But then you start seeing it's not true, you realize, hey, this world lies, people lie, it's a method to be used. It's a method to be used that you don't have to be honest about yourself. Then instead of admitting something happened, no, best thing is don't talk about it or lie about it. Children don't have that naturally. They learn it from those around them. They learn it from people who are duplicitous. That means us, to be more precise. And then we start the wandering, and then we start filling the gap with all kinds of alternatives. So it's a whole complicated process. You start from harmony, you move off slowly, and now you're suddenly in a world where you have all kinds of voices, all different directions. The only way to retrace it is to, as I said, first get back in your mind to a place of that type of unity or harmony or peace, and then begin wanting it. And then starts the most difficult process. How do you channel emotions that have been hijacked and are all over the place, get back to a place of peace? Another key thing, of course, is like peace, when you go to war, for instance, the war machine is one of the most efficient machines in life. You know why? Because there's a defined enemy. The enemy's over there. The commander-in-chief tells his generals, and the generals tell all the others, that's the enemy. Our job, our objective is to conquer that piece of land. And here's how we're going to do it. Everything is very clear and defined. The goal is defined, and therefore the methods are defined. When you're not at war, which is a blessing, of course, what happens? Someone asks you, give me your clarity, give me what your objective is. What do you want to achieve with your life? Most people are very difficult for them to answer that question. Almost everyone will say the same answer, which is, I want to have a lot of money and be happy. Now you can imagine, as much as we all say that, how empty that, what does that mean? And since when, because you say it is going to happen, that's not a defined goal. That's a goal, of course, it's a dream we all would like to have. It's not a defined way of how you're going to get there. In a mission statement, you need to find your way of getting there, not the generic. Every business cannot state that its mission statement is to make money or to be profitable. For a business to make a mission statement to be profitable will not have any investors, because how exactly are you going to be profitable? What are you selling? What are you buying? How is it going to make profit? Who's the competition? What are all the forces around you, etc., etc. So war tends to create such clarity, crystallizes the enemy, and crystallize what you want to achieve. Therefore, there's harmony in a good war machine, in a good army. What you have is harmony. You have, unless there's mutiny. This is the reason why in armies and in the military, mutiny is the death sentence, because you put in jeopardy the whole focus of everybody if you waver for a moment. You're going after the enemy, and one guy decides he wants to do it differently. That's not acceptable. Again, I'm not advocating war. I'm just giving it as an example of where there's focus. The question is, can we carry such focus into our peaceful lives? And if you can't, you can understand why you cannot find real harmony. So, ironically, the war machine, in a way, is more harmony than peace. Not harmony in the war itself, harmony in the sense where all the forces are directed towards something. So another key element in discovering that inner peace, another common denominator you'll find by people who have that inner peace within them, is they know what they want. And not in generic terms. They have real focus. And that focus overrides everything else. And it's usually, I would say, it's not usually, but always, it is not financial focus. It doesn't mean they're focusing, they want their businesses to go from $1 million to 10 million or to 100 million. Because money itself cannot really be a source of peace. Money may be a source of security to some extent. It definitely is a great, what they call sugar coating element that makes you feel that you have everything you need. But look at people. One financial advisor tells me, the wealthier, the higher the net worth of his clients, the more miserable they are. So money and happiness are not necessarily equatable. That it's a great drug, that it covers up, and that it gives you the illusion of power, absolutely. But does it withstand the test of time? and a test of generations. Again, I'm not suggesting that everyone be blessed with money, and I'm sure everyone will say, if I had all the money in the world, I'd be the most peaceful person on earth. Well, you should still be blessed with money, but don't ever think it's one brings the next. There's nothing to do with one another. So, what it comes down to is those people really at peace have the ability to be able to create a focus of their lives that goes beyond their immediate here and now. And that goes back to what I said earlier, that we all begin like children in a state of harmony, except children don't yet have objectives. So what is the objective? What is the objective of creating such harmony? Well, if you're a believer, and I'm assuming that we're talking here based on the assumption of belief, if God told you, here's what I want you to accomplish with your life. I sent your soul down here, whatever, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, anybody older than that, and I sent it down for a particular purpose. And until you don't fulfill your purpose, your soul will never be at peace. So the question is, do we even wonder, why is our soul here? Many people do not wonder that, because they're too busy. They may wonder, but they don't have much time to think about it, because they're too busy making ends meet. And then what happens is, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. As, who said? John Lennon. Okay. I got that right. Okay, fine. So and even when you do wonder, you ask, okay, how do I get to a place like that? But as long as you're not in that place, it shouldn't surprise you that you're not really at peace. Because the question is, what you're doing, is it really what you should be doing? Even if it's giving you a secure salary, even if you feel somewhat fulfilled, is this really what you should be doing? And you think if that question haunts you, it means right away that you cannot really be at total peace. They used to give a blessing to a person. I think even Perkudei alludes to the same type of expression. That the great blessing that you should know that where you are right now, the place, the time, is exactly where you need to be. Most of us don't feel that way. We sometimes think, I'm missing out, maybe I shouldn't be here, maybe I should be in a different time, in a different place. The reason we wonder is because we're not sure about our mission, where we are. People that have that inner peace, you'll see wherever, 24/7. And even when life is difficult, they have a sense that where they are and the time they're in is exactly where they need to be. That doesn't mean that they're fatalistic, that, whatever happens they accept. It also means that you're in a place where you don't want, where it's dangerous or something, you do everything possible to get out of it. But if you did everything you could possibly, everything in your power, and you're still there, they do not suddenly give up. They realize that I must be there for another reason, even though I may not understand it, and even though it may not be where I want to be, physically. So it's a type of inner peace with being led, in a way. And that does not contradict making our plans. So all this is pretty heavy in a sense, because now you're talking about how do you find that place that you can say, I'm really at peace with what I'm doing. So there are a few methods that I'll just share with you. One is that there's no question that in your life you've had moments where you felt completely at home, where you felt that you were in the right place. It may have been just a glimpse, like a magical moment. It may have passed and not come back. It's critical to find such moments because they're usually signposts that help you discover, that thing that gave you inner peace. And it's all kinds of things. I'll give you an example. Someone told me the other day that she was working with special children for around 10, 15 years of her life. And it was very difficult, but it was very gratifying. Then she decided, enough is enough. I want to make some more money. And she changed jobs. And ever since she's been miserable. Paid much more. Doesn't have so much emotional challenges. And she's going back to that work. This is a very simplistic example in a way, because it was pretty easy for her to realize. But 15 years she's been away from it. And her life has not been working. In all ways. More successful in every way, but does not have relationships and so on. And I asked her this question. I said, was there ever a time in your life that you felt, and she immediately said, yeah, when I did that work. So I said, so how could you, so she's going back to it. Interesting to see what will happen. And how kind of ripple effect it has. Because remember, if you're not happy in one area of your life, it has to spill over to other areas. Now, it may not be as easy as it was for her than all of us, because some of us may never had a place like that. Some people say, I don't remember any place I was ever at peace. Since I'm a child, I always feel I don't belong. But it's hard to, I think with a little prodding, everyone can find something. It may be something you may be dismissing because you think it's so childish or meaningless. If you really push, and let someone who you trust help you push, you can find it. Does that solve it all? No, but it gives at least a signpost. It gives something to work with. It's like you want to create those coordinates. So everything I'm saying here really are a bunch of different methods and different ways that we can re-access that type of place. And finally, I think I could say this as finally, there's probably more, but I'll say this. Finally, there's a thing called confusion breeds confusion and harmony breeds harmony. You be around people that have harmony in their lives. It will help you. Be around people who are more confused, like misery loves company, guaranteed to help you be more miserable. You may be more comfortable because then, everyone's that way, but it's not going to help you grow. So finding people who have that type of inner peace. Now remember, people who usually have peace don't like to be around people who are very confused. So it may be a battle to get around those people and stay around them. They may not want you as a friend. So you may have to work a little at it. But people, but there are people like that. And finding those type of people in your lives that have that type of inner peace that you see come to a place of harmony. And not passive, mind you. These people are not just, I'm at peace, I'm at bliss, and everything is fine and good. Many of these people are usually very driven, but they're not disturbed by their environments. Winds and storms don't shake them, because they have that core. It's like the tree with the roots, the deep roots. And I would say there's no doubt in my life, in my mind rather, that the crisis we have of relationships and commitment is the immediate consequence of a life of no peace. Because when you're not at peace, it's very hard to commit to something, because you don't really know what you want. You don't know how to stick with it. So you doubt yourself. So you may meet a woman or a man, and they may seem to be the right person, and you go out and you try this. And your own doubts start plaguing you. You start haunting yourself and say, maybe not, maybe, it becomes like you have nothing, you have no solid ground to stand on, so it shifts all the time. So it has to impact your relationships with things. And often the best sign of someone who doesn't have that inner stability is someone who's unable to stay in one place for too long. Commitment is very difficult. Now, of course, you could always blame the other person, but I don't know how much that really gets you anywhere. It always takes two to tango, so I'm not suggesting it's always our own fault, but you can't really, building your own inner peace is about you. It's not about somebody else. No matter what other person may be or may not be, who you attract or who you're repelled by, ultimately you have the power to build that inner place. So I have to conclude again with what I started. The bottom line is that it's absolutely possible. Without that confidence, all this discussion really is worthless, because you can have all the methods in the world. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe it's possible, how much commitment will you really invest in it? So it has to be absolutely possible, and then it has to be something you really desire, you really want. And when you get there, maybe we don't ever fully get there, but it's a journey. When you start getting to places like that, your life changes completely. Because instead of you being spinned around by everything that's happening around your life, you're here and everything else spins around you. It's a very good place to be. So, because you're there, the core, and the rest fits in and doesn't fit in. So there's a lot more that can be said about this, and I hope I did some justice to this subject matter. Looking at your faces here, it looks like everybody is very much at peace right now. Or I may be confusing it with the fatigue. That's another thing you could wear people down to. That's another way to go. And I hope that some of these words, as they used to say, Yifalu bi b'hashemim, that they should impact me as well as yourselves. And please see me and Meaningful Life Center as hopefully a stabilizing force in this chaotic world, center world. Now, I will make an announcement. This is probably going to be the last week we're going to do the class here. Yeah. We're moving from here because of all kinds of reasons, but not all good, pleasant ones. But so we will announce where we shall be. But if anybody has at least temporary ideas of locations, please let us know. And we had a 2-year agreement on lease here, which is basically almost was up already. So, but if anybody has any ideas, definitely want to be somewhere in the area. It's a pretty good area. But we're open to every idea possible. So you could either speak to me or to Velvel. And I want to say as well, again, the class sponsored by Maya Patash in memory of her father, Levi ben Yehuda and Batsheva. And may you grow through the process, and may your father's soul elevate through our learning together, and reciprocal type of force. Philip will be doing his class tomorrow night here. Yes, at 7 p.m. And what else should I announce? Could I announce? I bring you warm regards from California, where I was till last night. I was at a Limud conference in LA in Costa Mesa, which was very interesting. On 700 kindred spirits. I learned many different things there, and then I was in Santa Barbara on Monday night, in case you're interested. In case you're not, you can delete it. Fine. So, with that being said, I wish you all a harmonious week and life, and finding some peace at your core, a little shalom. And I wanted to add one more thing, which I elected to mention, was one of the reasons I chose to speak about it. The power of Shabbos, Shabbos Menucha, Shabbos Shalom, is all about this inner peace. Unfortunately, Shabbos has been somewhat hijacked and has become a ritualistic thing about what you eat and what you sing and when you sleep. But the real truth of Shabbos is an inner journey into that inner core of peace. Shalom Bayis. I wish I could say that every home, come Shabbos, they're able to travel back to that inner place. But that's the way it was meant to be, just for the record. So I just wanted to throw that into it. And don't underestimate its power. Once a week, no matter what, like a clock, you have to travel to that place. With learning a little Chassidus, a little spiritual dimension.